Hello, everyone, to the Jewish Week Online. I'm your host, Aaron Herman. How do you showcase Jewish innovation? With the opportunity to speak with Will Schneider, director of Slingshot, to learn how his organization are connecting Jewish innovators to funders. Let's take a quick look. Whenever you look for innovation in the Jewish world, sometimes it's difficult to truly understand the potential of innovators and connecting them to funders. And Slingshot is really a leader in providing the opportunity for people who have big ideas to get recognized and funders to understand really what's out there. So tell us a little bit about why Slingshot was created.
Thank you for inviting me to be here. So where did Slingshot come from is it's a great story. There was a network of 20 and 30-something funders, the children of family foundations and philanthropic families who wanted to be involved in the Jewish community, but maybe they weren't exactly excited about what their families had done in the past, or that wasn't where they saw themselves entering anyway. So they asked people from the Andrea and Charles Bronfman philanthropies to create a list of some sort of the most innovative, inspirational programs they could find, and that became the first edition of Slingshot. It was published for just this relatively small network called Grand Street, G-R-A-N-D, the Children of Funders, but they ended up printing 5,000 copies that first year because of how many people across the country wanted to see that list.
And one of the toughest things for organizations is like getting the message out about their innovation, and being a part of various different Jewish startups that do tremendous work. It was always like that struggle, like how do I get those funders to recognize my work? And most recently, the Jewish New Teacher Project was featured in Slingshot.
Sure.
And I know that one of the things that when I was involved in the organization, I was like, we do great stuff. Now, how do we tell our story?
Yeah.
And it's Slingshot provides that resource where smaller organizations that are doing just fantastic things need a voice. What are you seeing in the as the application process goes? How do you I guess decide that this is innovative?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, and you're talking about two different kinds of impact too. It's impact on the reader of the guide and impact on the organizations featured, and I do try to think about that separately. So, reader of the guide who says, I'd love to be involved in the Jewish community, but I just don't know what exists. That's one sort of layer of impact, and where we aim. And then there's things like, how does the Jewish New Teacher Project get their message out there, and what's the impact of Slingshot on the organization? So it's two different levels. I mean, and a lot of what we look at is messaging. There are a lot of great programs out there, and how are they talking about it? And what Slingshot looks for, I guess, if your question is how do we define innovation, what Slingshot looks for is relevancy. The idea that the world has changed a lot in the last, you could say 40 years, but you could say even less than that. The world has changed a lot in the last 20 years, and the Jewish community hasn't always changed with it. Now, I think there's a gap between the needs of the community and the organizations that exist to fill those needs, and that gap is where Slingshot organizations find themselves. So, the messaging is often about the relevancy. We've looked at the need on the ground, and here's what we're doing to address that need. And when an organization really nails that answer, like the Jewish New Teacher Project, it's really obvious when you see their material.
Yeah, it's one of those things where when you're sort of like, what I call it, in the suck of the innovation,
yeah.
And it's your day-to-day job to inspire and do whatever, and then there's that funder, like, okay, how do I get connected to these people? And then there's that resource guide that when people are like, what, it's like the stamp of approval. It's like you have your own way of saying, like, what, this is something that you should be looking at. And I think funders, especially now when between a decrease in funding along the board in Jewish engagement, funders really want to see what's really effective. What do funders say about the whole process?
About the process of creating the guide, or?
Yeah.
I think, so we're just started work on our 10th edition. I think, at this point, the process has been refined, and I won't say perfected, but I think it's a very solid process. I think it's as transparent as an evaluation process can be. And there's a lot of data available on the back end for funders, and I think people tend to get a lot out of that information. So it's the application, the evaluation. Every application is read by 4 people. Every person reads 10 applications. So we end up with thousands of pages of data about the innovation community. We got 25% more applicants this year than we've ever had in the past, more than 25%. So it's, I think, on sort of every metric level that of your question that we can track anyway, it's a very solid evaluation system, and funders, I think, respect that. Look, you don't have to agree with every choice in the book, but respect that there's a process that chooses them, and that there's a it's as transparent and agenda free as possible. I hope people have respect for that.
And how do you choose your evaluators? Obviously, this is a very serious process. It's not. How do you decide who's appropriate?
Yeah, no. So there were 30 some odd evaluators when I started this job, and there's 113 this year. So it's been, and we have essentially one principle we start with, and it's that the evaluators are knowledgeable about the community, but not people who might apply for the book. That's really the people who we look for, and so the core of that group is foundation professionals. Most of our evaluators are professionals at foundations that make grants to innovative Jewish organizations. Happily, that's a growing group of people, and I think we're pretty tapped into that. I'd say the Slingshot evaluator community is just about wall to wall. It's 90% of the money that funds Jewish innovation somehow is involved in the creation of the Slingshot guide. I'm making up the number 90%, but it's a very significant percentage of the money, at least in foundations with professionals. We add in what we call subject matter experts as necessary. So, we're producing a guidebook. Last year we produced a guidebook on inclusion in the disability community, and, we ended up needing about 10 or 15 people who sort of specialized in that area. So we went to academic community, we went to funders who focus on that specifically. We sprinkled in a bunch of evaluators. The skill is also creating the evaluation assignment so that the right people are reading the right things, and it takes us several weeks to get that right as well.
And with the increase in applications, it's probably very difficult to get wheel it down to the number that you're looking for.
It's very competitive, yeah.
Yeah. So what happens with people who don't get it? Do you still keep in a pool? How does this? What happens with those?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's historically been one of my big frustrations, because what's the difference between number 50 and 51? And at some point you have to, we're printing a physical book, and we can't just sort of make it endlessly long, and to be an effective tool, it's got to be tight as well. So this year we have a great solution. I think for the first time we were allowing the application to be a common app as well. So there are funders and giving circles in particular across the country who maybe can't create an RFP that people are responding to, or don't want to create an RFP, but they do want new ideas of what's out there. So they can reach out to us and ask for applications in various sleeves. So they could say they want the arts and culture project in the Northeast, and we could send them a sleeve of applications that they can review. And I encourage them to ask additional questions to the organizations, but at the very least they'll get, we have, I think, probably the best annual generic look on what's happening in the Jewish community in terms of huge numbers of applications every year, and we'd love to make those applications more publicly available to funders. So we're making an attempt at that this year. So I'm hoping by applying once to Slingshot, you end up being considered by Slingshot, by our supplements and other editions, as well as by funders across the country. So hopefully it continues to be sort of a central application process.
As you can see, Slingshot is a wonderful tool to connect Jewish innovators to funders and educate the community at large about incredible opportunities within our local and global Jewish community. This is Aaron Herman. Thank you for watching.